Oh, welcome back, especially Mr. Producer. Welcome back, Mr. Producer. I should be behind the camera today, and you should be out here talking about Kilimanjaro, don't you think? I know, I know people have been asking you to do that. I'll edit it for you. I better shut up. Oh, golly. I want to thank, before we start today, I want to thank Stephen J., David D., and Benjamin C. for their recurring donations. Thank you guys very, very much. This is such a help. Maintaining, is a big deal. I'm not sure we're going past maintaining, but and I'm never wasting my time talking about these things because we have a bigger thing to do. As I don't know, you could say as people, we're trying to be better at all the things we do as the human race. And the idea of being able to elevate somebody else following you, if it's possible, is an exciting prospect. So, and I've been certainly in that class of people who've been elevated by some good painters of my time, and of course everybody, all of us are very much elevated by those who've preceded us in the distant past. All the way back to the Greeks and before that, and uh, hence the Renaissance and so on. But uh, so, in any case, thank you guys for that very nice donation. And today's question, the statement actually is an interesting one from James B. And at first I thought, this is just the sort of thing you expect from as counter conversation but I think it was constructive. I think it's a perfectly good question. I have a question about this study, and I think he means the videos. There's no longer an art market for this kind of painting. You couldn't sell an original work of art in this style anywhere. So why are you addressing an art form which is dead? And so I don't, and I so I thought it'd be useful to talk about what we all know, right? First of all, the question of, you might say, a dead art form, and yet we're all doing it. All us living people are working in this form because it's not dead to us, right? But I don't want to go off in that direction right at the beginning. I'd rather talk about some other things. But first of all, let's just talk about this little thing. Is there no longer an art market? By the way, I would paint this way if there wasn't an art market. It's what I do. It's what I love. It gives meaning. That is to say, the connections to the great art of the past has brought me to an understanding of its value, and I value it enough to spend my life doing it. And we all, by our present lives, are defining. We're defining the future, but we're defining all these forms by our present activities. So never say, as I'm talking to the rest of you, if not to James, why would you ever say there's no longer an art market for this kind of painting if you actually are yourself in love with it? There's going to be people like you out there. And sure enough, that's what I've found. My students are constantly selling pictures. I sell pictures. I'm painting portraits for people. And you could say in this style, I don't know what you mean by in this style, by the way, unless you mean Impressionism. But that's a much bigger and more interesting question in itself, what even that is. But no, I have people studying with me, hundreds of people studying with me over years, and probably some number like that. And many of them are making a very reasonable living at painting. Some of them better than that. So, so what makes an art form dead? You couldn't sell an original work of art. Is selling it what makes it dead? It's funny because you could say Impressionism before it ever was born was dead. I mean, people say you can't sell that, and they couldn't. They couldn't sell that stuff. And you could say, well, somebody then said, but I see value in it, and then they marketed it. So, sorry, Mr. Producer, I think I just whacked my mic. But you understand that you have to be a believer in the value you see in the things you love and present it, bring it. I mean, if you don't do a good job, of course you're not going to sell it. But whatever it is, if it has merit, let's say if it's good for the soul, if it's good for the human, the elevation of the mind, the expression of truth, and et cetera, then, pursue it, bring it. You've got something to bring it, right? And, but so there are many things you might call styles, but Impressionism is probably one that I don't think even initiated itself as a style. I think it initiated itself as a search. And of course, that's the sort of thing that might wind up lending a style. But if you don't see a difference between Monet's style and then that of the Boston School or Sargent and other people who are actually adapting the knowledge that Monet brings, then you're probably looking from the outside, and you haven't, it's like, everybody looks the same if you're from the same race. That's just silly. But from across the street, you would say that, right? So you could say that all representational form is dead. Is the representational form dead? I mean, the funny thing is modern art has never come to life. Modern art. The UN used to do, I don't think they still do it anymore, UNESCO or somebody used to do these studies. For some reason, I wish I knew the reason, but I have suspicions because I don't trust their motives. But they kept trying to find out what the popular sense was of modern art. Do people like this? Do people like this? And they kept doing year after year. They would do these polls, and they never could get. And I don't have any idea if they've done it in the last 5 years, say, but they never could get the average person that they're polling. They could never get the numbers of the amount of people who understood and cared for modernism, modern abstract painting, however they phrased it, to get above 15% of the population. So you could argue that that's a dead form even before it starts, right? But on the other hand, that's even that, I'm not going to tell you it's a different form. It's still paint on canvases. I think frequently the motives have changed for some of those people, but whereas throughout the history, certainly of Western art and representational painting, as we know it in modern times, there's always been this inclination to do a very positive thing, to find beauty, to elevate the mind, and all the rest of that stuff. So, but what that means is that 85% of the people, that's your market, still love this stuff. And also another 85% thing is I think I've read not that long ago that 85% of the people who go to modern art schools are out of the business in 5 years, permanently out of out of their art form in 5 years, just have other jobs. Now, that's not something I say to deride anything. I'm saying what gives viability to a form. I mean, so, my students aren't getting other jobs. Maybe some of them are, but they're finding they can make a living in this. So if that's how you define a living form, can you make a living? Is there an art market for it? The answer is really decidedly, of course there is. There very much is. And then the next question is, do mannerisms and styles and things like that come and go? Yeah, they definitely do. I'm going to talk about some of that. I'll show you some pictures just for fun. But so I'm not addressing a dead art form. I'm addressing a living one. Representational painting is never going away. It's just the way it is. It is sort of it just embodies too much of value. It somehow or other holds together I won't say it holds together as a form like music does. The visual, and to whatever extent it's pictorial in the sense of telling stories or something like that. The illustration, of course, isn't going anywhere, but that's not what I mean by our form. I'm talking about the larger idea of color play and the things related, form play, things are related to making music with the stuff of the eyes, over and above the story element of it. So if you understand that, that's not going away. And it's one of the nice things about Degas we talked about recently is that he really has done a lot to help us to really focus in on that, Some of the reason all this is happening is communication has become so much greater. So you weren't just living in your little vacuum, in your little bottega in a little piece of Italy, maybe with a visit from some Rubens or somebody, or somebody from Spain once in a while. But we're now able to, by the time you get to Degas, you're able to address this question in a much bigger way. And you can, what is the nature of this form becomes suddenly huge. And Degas starts saying that as you look at Degas, you can begin to realize he's coming to conclusions that other people have sort of hinted at, but he's coming to conclusions that are really, really, bringing change, bringing focus, bringing more clarity to what the purpose is of our form, or what it but it does best, right? Fascinating times when you have so much knowledge coming together, and it's really even more so now. The increase in knowledge is, is prophesied in the scriptures actually, in Revelations as the end times is the expansion of knowledge is huge. So, so I'm not addressing a dead art form. Otherwise, I would agree with you. I would be a scholar, if I was talking about a dead art form. I'm talking about one where I live. It's live. It's live where I am. And excuse me, guys. I don't know if I've come in with a runny nose before. It's a time of year here, I think. So let's just move on. Let's look at some pictures because that's the first part of the question right there. The question of the art market, the question of an art form, but the question of style, that's a big one. It's kind of a fascinating one. I like that because styles do come and go. Dead, I don't know if that's a thing. So I wanted to make a couple other points though, and one is that I've been very pleasantly surprised to have people working with me from time to time who are not in our field at all, to only just tell me, well, Paul, don't you know I have that painting on my walls? They might have been looking at this Tarbell on the left, or a Benson. People are doing this on an everyday basis with me. And I'm not telling them what to put on their walls. They could put Michelangelo on their walls. Some do that. You could put, a drawing by Rubens on your walls. Some do that. By the way, and that brings us to the discussion about whether a really beautiful piece of work ever in itself dies. It's got an ongoing life through all of mankind, and that's one of the ways we measure value in painting as years and years go by, and we still go back to the same guys and say, "Wow, yes," So it's kind of a huge thing to leap to the idea that things die in that one sense. But styles do come and go. What happened with the Impressionists, though, wasn't a style thing. If you think that this is a style thing, if you think Monet was painting for a style, you wouldn't have him well read. He's painting in a way that enables him in the color and light world. It's an enabling methodology. It was a necessary methodology to get at more profound truth as it relates to color and light. You might say the light of color even, or the color of light. But is the way I meant to say it, yeah. So profound that you see Sargent borrowing from Sargent. That's a picture painted by Sargent on the bottom right. He's sitting there taking lessons from Monet. What are you up to down here? You're changing the world, man. Does that mean that Sargent is now obsolete? At that time, was Sargent suddenly become obsolete because Monet stepped up, right? Actually, Monet's older than Sargent, but even if that weren't true. But at this point, everybody grasps that. But you get to the Boston School guys or Sargent, they're not simply clones of a dead style. These guys are taking knowledge and they're building on it. And that's the most crucial thing you have to understand about painting. We build on what you'd like to call a dead past. Every bit of knowledge we have is gleaned, from a field, a fruitful field, at one time very fruitful field. And now we're maintaining certain things from that field that we say, this is to build on. This is solid stuff. We can go from here. We can build with this. But what? Well, what are you? What is it? What is it? What's in your makeup that makes you do this? And what is it about all these guys here that you're addressing? You're saying, you keep bringing something to me. You Michelangelo, you Rubens, you Rembrandt, somebody. What are you doing? What is it why do I keep hearing this music? I don't know if this is the time to mention it. I was just thinking about dead in the sense of rhyme schemes. A lot of people have the belief that rhyming poetry is dead. Somebody ought to tell Richard Wilbur. I think, is he still our poet laureate in this country? He's a rhymer. Now, he doesn't. I don't know if he always rhymes, and I know his rhyme schemes aren't this versus that. There's certainly a lot of sort of looseness, but there's this tendency toward rhythm and toward sound and toward other things in his poetry, that poetry of his predecessor Frost in that position and others. These things aren't going anywhere. It defines the form, So one of the things I'm doing on here, and you ask, well, I would even address this in the study. I'm trying to give students of the truth of nature in front of them. I'm trying to give them a handle on how to get to the bottom of color, in case color is a thing with which they're going to find themselves enabled in terms of their own personal expression. So to have some mastery of that, it's big stuff. It's big stuff. So it isn't going to go anywhere. It doesn't make any difference if it does go anywhere. But there's streams, there's always streams. And you could say that some people are dedicated to, in painting, I mean, talking even in representational painting, there's streams. Some people are dedicated to light and color. Some people are far more dedicated to form and line and that sort of thing. The difference between an Ang and a Monet. But even Ang himself is saying, don't you understand? You can't draw, my kind of drawing is going to interfere with the free will that color needs, with the freedom that color needs to be the storyline. And this is the odd and interesting, fascinating thing that you're seeing in Monet. He's actually, you might say, he's living out the presumptions and the assumptions, the conclusions of Ang. So, but nevertheless, I'm saying there's many streams. And if yours is a sculptural stream, that is, say, if there's something about line and form that is far more what is your reason, that is the thing that's in your eye that you can express whatever it is that makes you want to be here with, then that's the stream you're in, right? And that stream's not going away. You could say it's an eternal stream. It's just the stuff of the human eyeball. So it's not going away. One of the odd things in the presumptions of art schools is that idea of progress, that forms change, They tried all kinds of junk in music, like making no noise at all, having no rhythms, no rhymes, no anything. Music, that kind of music is, you won't find that human beings want that kind of no music, right? There's got to be something about that, isn't there? These are forms, they exist. They exist before, they exist in all mankind, and you might argue before all mankind. Fascinating questions. Anyway, let's look at some more pictures. These three get us started. But if you want to talk about, I'm just going to talk about style for a second. Here's Raphael on the left and Botticelli on the right doing what they in those days referred to as the graces, or the three graces, semi-nude figures that all are supposed to represent aspects of the stuff of the world of the world of art. Well, everything bigger than that even. So the ideas of grace and all those things. The graces, what are the graces, and so on. But what is going on here? These people, that's already been done. Botticelli did it. What's Raphael doing? Who does he think he is? Right? He's dead, Raphael's. The subject's been talked about. Of course, and the subject is just one of those things that doesn't die, does it? If you go to the style of Rubens, look at the difference between Rubens and Raphael. Look at the difference between these three different guys stylistically. Now, which one of these forms is dead? Probably the one that's the most, so to speak, if there's such a thing as death. No, I don't believe there is. But you could argue that the one that's dead is the one that's most heavy in style, because people are no longer attracted to that style. When there's a convergence of styles like that are affecting sculpture, like you're seeing in the Bernini in a similar time frame as Rubens, and the Rococo, Baroque, whatever that style is, I manage to confuse the two frequently. And I'm not sure they are just overlapping, in certain, depending on what part of the country you're in, world you're in. But that's my thing. I'm not going to pretend it is my thing. I'm not the art historian here. But if you understand that here we have three different pictures of the graces, three different interpretations of them, and they're all still alive and well. And I'll suggest to you that maybe the burden of Rubens has the biggest burden but that you could say is the fashion of the time. Is that what people perceived the ideal woman to look like? Because obviously those ideals have shifted, haven't they, through these times? If that's an ideal, I mean. But to use, you're talking about the graces, you're talking about probably presenting an ideal, and the female figure, the nude female figure, has always represented something that sort of the high end of beauty. Until we get, of course, to Picasso. And, I don't even know why I brought this. It just showed up when I was looking for a different picture online. But it actually is rather interesting, isn't it? If you want to talk about something dead, does anybody paint Does anybody paint this way anymore? I don't know. Maybe somebody does. But that's one of those things that goes with the style. Cubism, that cubistic thing they were doing, the deformation of form or whatever you're calling that thing. And they attempt to rather invent a new form or to whatever it was they were trying to do. There's a whole wonderful discussion, by the way, about kitsch that one of you guys made me look up. I think it was you, Jazz. I'll try to get into that sometime. But if you're talking about a form that's going to die, I suggest to you that this one's already, relatively speaking, dead. A lot of people are still imitating the Raphael stuff and others. In fact, I'll give you a nice example of it. Let me just jump way down to Ang. If you look at Ang was a Raphael guy. He considered Raphael God. You could say he was imitating a dead, a 200 years earlier guy, right? Or more, was it even more? Yeah. So, so here we're talking about something dead, right? Well, do we bring it back to life? Yeah. Well, nothing dies in painting. It's just so that's the whole thing about Ang and this whole conversation about are you into nature or are you into the masters? Well, he says be into the masters is in the way in the same way as in a way that doesn't lose sight of nature. I think is the best way to say that. And so he's saying, and I'm into this guy. When I see Raphael's got these qualities that he gets from nature, which are the same as mine. I'm going to listen to this guy for some time, right? But you can see that he's evolved significantly, and the word evolution is a big word in the end of this whole discussion. But watch out for that word, because all this stuff, the life in the past is still breathing like DNA in you today. It's coming right through, right? And it comes through, fortunately for us, we're so fortunate to have people who have saved pictures over time. Those people who love certain forms, certain actual pictures, I mean, and preserved them, took care of them, bought them, owned them, took care of them. Those people are to be so highly honored. And nowadays, of course, we get to see them just by having the amazing facilities of the online world. So here is the sort of the I think it's called Rococo. I don't know which. This stuff here is. So I'm going to talk about three different eras. I'm going to talk about the Baroque. I'm sorry, and whatever this is, Rococo, and then I'm going to talk about the Art Deco and the Art Nouveau, to sort of let you see the kinds of things that sort of are dead but aren't necessarily dead. So, but you can see stylistically if you look at this passage here, this whole it's like a doorway. It's above a doorway, I believe. I wish I could see the whole rest of the doorway there. I should have found more. But it's a sculptural treatment of an architectural element, right? But you can see the busyness of all this stuff, how far different that is from the simplicity of Raphael, and actually most of the people of the Renaissance, early Renaissance, and mid Renaissance, and busy. But that was one of their things. They were bringing a volatility and action, much like the earlier Greeks. They had stable, stiff figures, and all of a sudden, one of them started bringing life to their figures. So here we have. And by the way, that's one of those things that doesn't die. The life, the idea of a vitality, sort of a movement in a picture, isn't a thing that dies. Doesn't mean that every one of us is after that particular thing, but there it is, right? But you can see the heaviness of the style, the busyness, almost the hectivity of it. It may not appeal to you, and as a painter, that's a big thing, right? Don't paint pictures that don't have with which you don't connect. Don't be something you're not, I think would be a good way to say it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't reach out past on some level where you are, but just the sorts of things to think about, though, to live within yourself, live within your means. I remember that, I've mentioned to you guys before, but I remember this, Jamie, this nice guy who used to help me do videos back in the way old days of making videos at cable access stations. And he said that when he was teaching film students, I think he said he would let them, he said had to create something, I forget what the category was. Maybe it was just photography at the time. He would just not let them go more than 100 yards or some distance from the building at the college to get their content. And that's sort of in the same principle of living within yourself, because it's all there. It's all there. All you need is right there. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be more, one of the things about finding that thing about who you are is to be widely enough experienced. If you're a young student, see a lot of pictures. You can't be everything. And that's one of the beauties of seeing a lot of pictures. You finally realize that and you say, where can I live? Where's the place? Where's my zone? So so then here's the Art Deco. Why did I go to Art Deco? I meant to go to Art Nouveau first because they go in time. So I'm going to go to Art Nouveau, and I did this. There's a facade again of a doorway area, and you can see the whole different feeling of this thing. That feeling of grace, much greater simplicity, but the lines are more, shall we say, more obviously unified. That's Mucha on the right. I don't know the names of the architects and sculptor here. But the Rodin world is more like that. You could even see Sargent being a piece of that Art Nouveau world more than a lot of other people. Or John White Alexander, you can see there's a burden, in a sense, not a burden, but a pleasure in the Art Nouveau aesthetic, I think is the best word for it, probably. But there's a continuity between the sort of stylistically. And these things sort of sweep through. They sweep over a culture and they disappear, but they don't disappear forever. The values that are there. I mean, we still go back and look at this because it has values and they're incorporative. That's why I say in the evolution of your own form, these things will all influence you, the ones that have your name on them, shall we say. So let's go back and look at Art Nouveau. I should just stop here. This is kind of funny. This is a Lempica. She's probably a sort of a now heavy stylization, right? So you can see the automobile of the day. What was that, a Buick or so? But this idea of a lot of repetitious lines and these long sort of, I don't know what you want to call them, fairly simple but long repetitions or simplicities of lines. Look at the movie, if you haven't seen it, Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, when you're thinking Art Nouveau. You'll know what I mean. It's a delightful movie on numbers of levels, but that is very wonderfully heavy with Art Deco style. But that, if you know the Chrysler building, I don't know that thing on the right is part of it, but that's very much in the spirit of the Chrysler building. So much of this is based on, first of all, there's a great sense of grandeur in it, which is, it's even true of Michelangelo and others. But it's widely different, of course. But that might be one of the carry-throughs, right? But then it has this great sense of, but it has this repetitious thing that goes on. And who knows how much of that is derived from having watched. Well, see, that also goes on. I mean, that's in the nature of our form, by the way, like in the poetry of it. There's this idea of rhythms and rhymes in the visual world, as we've talked about recently. So, but I'm just showing you these to give you a sense of the style thing. Now, you aren't, in your work, you're not going to be precisely this, but I see people even today still using these forms at times. They're not trying to prove anything. And they don't have an obligation not to use forms to which either their subject in which their subject wants to find itself, or try to express itself, or simply something useful for a building. How are you going to design? How are you going to decorate a building that was designed in an Art Deco time if you don't have the capacity today in your live form to step into an Art Deco architecture, right? We have a need to be able to read the architecture and to understand what then pictorially would belong, even if it was done 100 years, 200 years before us, if that's what your call is, right? So did I miss anything there? No? All right. Now, I just want to talk about Raphael, because Raphael is, Ang, because Ang is a, in a sense, you'd say, well, he's this big old throwback. His work isn't Raphael, but if anybody ever does it, it's him. Going back to somebody else's stuff, and yet the guy was huge in his day. Now, this one you may not be able to understand as easily as the portrait. He was painting the portraits of the most important figures of his time. He was huge, huge, huge. Charged tons of money and required lots of sittings and could fill rooms with the studies he did. So, but he really did look to Raphael as sort of the source of the things that he thought the leading values in good pictures was, which of course was derived from his own experience before nature and his review of all the forms, right? So there's kind of an eclectic thing going on. But you see that painting doesn't die. It just morphs. It sort of, I don't know if the word is adapts, but I worry about you, James, thinking that idea. That's an idea that much more relates to the idea that we're trying to kill something. The modernists have been trying to kill this form forever, but you can't kill it. It's part of us. It's our eyes. And the idea of being elevating, the idea of doing something good for your fellow man, the idea of the good, the beautiful, and the true. When you're talking about just a form that is an eyeball form, do you see what I mean? But even the idea of the good, the beautiful, and the true, there are people who have been trying to kill that. Why can't I just say whatever damn thing I want to, so to speak, right? And I mean damnable thing. So yeah, that's a different world. That's a different form. And that again, the continuity. We don't come to painting because we love trashing other people. Because we see that someplace here somebody did some trashy thing. Those kinds of paintings aren't going to live very long. Talk about dying. Trashing paintings are the ones that don't make it. Even if you're talking about bad things happening, there's got to be in it a sense of talking about values, right? If you're showing the massacre of the innocents, you're talking about showing that in a way that says this is reprehensible. In other words, human life is a great value, right? That's in the nature of what we do if we want to prosper as a species, right? It's what we do. It's built into us. But what each one of us loves too. We were engaged by it. We were enriched by all this yes around us, all the amens to the beauty of life and to life itself. I say there might be one or two more. I even get entertainment out of the Ang interpretation of sort of Raphael in this picture is all form, right? I mean, you could say it's all line and form. And Ang just goes, so lives that little world, even the stylistic rocks, the stylistic clouds, the whole thing. It's delightful. It's delightful. It's a very focused kind of treatment, right? And as you said, it doesn't mean it has bad colors in it and bad color relations or anything like that. But it isn't it's got its own. Well, there's a word primary that fits in here. Its own a priori occupation. I wouldn't say preoccupation, but in a sense it is. So if Ang is Monet, first of all, he wouldn't be painting this, but he might be seeing something on a hillside, and he'd be just talking about the poetry of color. And these guys don't lack a sense of colors belonging together and being of a piece with each other, and that whole idea of unity and how things hang together, and there's a beauty to it. But it's just but if you look at these things for form and line, you'll see much more entertainment value. And Ang and if anybody, copy a sleeve by Ang if you want to get entertained by what line does. I mean, that's entertainment. Copy it. I've done that. Do it. And when Agama was actually teaching, one of the things he would do with us is he would try to get us to design this little fold in the sleeve here, all these folds. He said you have to design that. He wasn't meaning you have to draw that and copy it. He was saying you have to design that. Isn't that interesting? That's an Angian concept. So with a person in line and form, this whole idea of how big this fold is and how it relates to that fold, we're not talking about as folds per se, but as form ideas. That gets you, just introduces you to where the music lies for that kind of a painter. There's no end of entertainment and pleasure and delight and, if you want to say it, poetry, actually, in the interplay of forms by Ang. It's not about accuracy to the model. In fact, he decried the idea, even though he did it, apparently, of using the lay figure, draping the figure and just copying that form off, that drapery off into your painting, So, yeah, where can I go with that? I'm going to go. I just did one. This is probably a nice one to end on. This is the School of Athens, and then you have again a Greek theme by it. So he's even taking the subject matter, so to speak, that you might say of Raphael. Ang is the one below is Ang. The upper one is Raphael. But you could say that his treatment is remarkably the same, right? But it doesn't mean that it isn't timely. It's his own interpretation in his time. And that's a big, big, big deal. You can be an impressionist anytime, but it's your own impression. It's because you are unique to these times. You're unique with your own eyes to looking at the world in front of you. And that idea of what a beautiful thought. The idea of the individual, the idea of the reflections of an individual eye, on the things of nature, on the beauty of nature. It doesn't go anywhere. But you may find in this form or that form, these are, and when you say form, by the way, James, you're talking about Impressionism, but so I'll use that term that way. But form, normally we think of form as sculpture versus dance versus, et cetera, painting. But that form, if you mean switching from Impressionism to outline based or whatever, or form and line versus color and light or something. Yeah, if you say that, your inspiration, that thing that is making you even want to paint, is going to find its best practices. And it's going to be in one of these methodologies more than others. And that's when you start sort of beginning to head over, to have a look at the starts, for example, of what these guys are doing, that have the ability to and have turned on that kind of music and have made that kind of music work in a painting. What did they do? How did they do it? These lessons are never going to die, but the things of the eyes are also never going to die. So be careful when you say dead. Styles, yeah, they really drift, or rather they so morph that you'll never see somebody, hopefully, in one sense, you'd say, hopefully never see somebody going back to that again, because who really wants to go back in that way? I believe in forever painting a new song. I love that scripture that says, sing a new song unto the Lord. It doesn't say sing an old song unto the Lord, it says sing a new song. It's your job to bring a song, but it's a song, right? The song of praise. It's a song of praise of the, of the good, right? The good, the beautiful, the true, right? I'm all over the place. James, I'm going to go back and have one last look at your question, your comment, and let's see if there's anything else I should talk about. But I think that's probably covered it. Yeah. I've thoroughly covered it. Here, I'm going to look at it, just bring it to everybody here. So I have a question about this study. There's no longer an art market for this kind of painting. Now, I'd be dead if there wasn't an art market for this kind of painting. I'd say I'd be working at Walmart or hopefully something a little less low than that. But I might be working in the university system or something. You couldn't sell an original work of art in this style anywhere. Now, if you mean Impressionism, I'm saying keep remembering that my students are selling this kind of work all the time. It's highly marketable. And every level of this form, so to speak, has been done before, right? The newest thing really is, and this is the sort of the cutting edge, was the Impressionist incorporation, the idea of fully incorporating the mystery and magic of the truth in front of you more fully than ever before, not for the purpose of making photographic likenesses, but because it was so rich and deep, a source, a mine, a thing to mine. So, and for that reason alone, by the way, painting doesn't go anywhere because that's what it also is. It's a long mining of something so profoundly bigger than, deeper than all of us. We come by and have our 70 years if we're lucky, but we don't. What do we know? What do we know? We've seen nothing. So it's deep. It's long. Art is long. Life is short. Art is long. This word eternal might even apply. Life. Yeah, we croak, it's over for us, but art, it outlives us all. So be careful. The word dead, tough word. I know there are people who wish it was dead, but it's living. And you see the great explosion of all the ateliers. That's an indication that there's a huge amount of call. If individuals are called to do the painting, then there are lots more people who are called to just like that kind of painting, which means there's always going to be a market. All right, James B., thank you for the question. It's been a lot of fun. And again, welcome back, Mr. Producer. Thanks again to my wonderful donors, and see you in the next one.